It's at best a pretty dysfunctional relationship. At worst, it's the most toxic relationship in the history of cinema.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this overwhelming adventure. Well, overwhelming for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's so much Star Wars. That's why it's overwhelming. There's so much Star Wars coming at us, and in such a really relatively short period of time. There was a bunch of announcements at the D23 event down in Anaheim of releases, new shows coming out, new trailers. There's a lot of new press releases, and it's just like, wow, so much electricity in the fandom right now, so much excitement and anticipation. And like I said, shows that I hadn't even heard of. And of course, it's not that I generally keep up and up to date with all the latest news and announcements, and especially trailers. I don't even watch trailers, but a lot of this stuff I had no idea was coming. So here's just a quick list of Star Wars amazingness that's coming our way in the very near future. A show called The Skeleton Crew, which I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's a new animated series. We have Ahsoka, Ahsoka. Come on, that's a highly anticipated show. That's a show that I've been very excited about since the announcement that there was going to be an Ahsoka show. We have The Mandalorian season 3 coming out in February of 2023. Bad Batch in January 2023, and we've got a new show called Tales of the Jedi, October 2022. That's another animated series, I believe, and that looks incredible. As I said, I don't really watch trailers, but just the idea of it sounds incredible. And then, of course, the imminent, well, as of the release of today's show, we have Andor. Andor is coming out today, or has already come out today. And so that's really exciting. That gives us a lot to work with, and well, yeah. I mean, I think just looking back, I feel like I really started this show at an amazing time in the history of Star Wars, because like with the assets being released on Disney Plus, and like kind of this move into series as opposed to features. Not that features are gone, but like they're churning out features left and right, and it's really it's really served well for the purposes of the show. It's given us a lot to talk about, and it looks like we will continue to have a lot to talk about in the very, very near future. So I can't wait to dive into this stuff. Super excited about all of it. The other reason why this adventure is overwhelming is because it has been a little bit for me anyways, things on my end. And I appreciate you guys giving me grace for not having an episode last week, and for not even announcing or explaining that I wasn't going to have an episode. Things just got a little crazy. I've taken on a lot of new projects. I do have a second show called Path of the Network Marketer, and that releases an episode every day, and there's a video version of that as well on YouTube and Facebook. And so just with everything that I'm doing right now, where it's a very busy, it's a very busy time of year for me, and just everything that's happened over the last few months, I just, last week was a little bit too much, and so I had to step back, and the one thing that got sacrificed was an episode of this show, unfortunately. And here's the thing, I did just do an episode on Cassian, and talking about how he got so pulled in and sucked into the work of what he was doing for fighting against the Empire, that he risked losing a little bit of himself, right? He risked losing himself to the work, and forgetting why he was doing it in the first place. And so it's important when you do have a lot on your plate, again, to step back and to make sure that you don't lose yourself to the work. arc, and that's what I did. I stepped back and I paid attention more to self-care than to productivity, because it's not the end of the world, right? If I miss one episode, the world won't end, the show won't completely crash. You guys still support, and here you are. I mean, that's proof of it, right? You're listening to the episode today, so I appreciate you guys again giving me the grace and giving me the leeway to just take a week off unannounced and without explanation. But we are here. We're back. We're ready to go. We're back on the horse with a fresh new episode this week just for you. All right, so let's just dive right into it, because we got a pretty... well, I mean, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but it's definitely a polarizing topic. like there are definitely, there are definitely strong opinions about this particular subject matter, and that is the topic of REYLO, the relationship between Kylo Ren and Rey, who at the end of Rise of Skywalker becomes Rey Skywalker, who at the beginning or towards the first half of the movie we learn is actually Rey Palpatine. All right, so yeah, you guys, I think maybe can hear from my tone how I feel about the Rise of Skywalker. I loved it, but I hated it. So anyways, we're talking about the relationship between Kylo Ren and Rey. Really, I mean, if you look at it from, I mean, there's no way around it. It's at best a pretty dysfunctional relationship. At worst, it's the most toxic relationship in the history of cinema, right? I mean, they're like, one is hell bent on destruction and taking over the galaxy, and the other has attachment issues. Yeah. I mean, together they're really one of the most. They're just headed for self-destruction, and so like the fact that it becomes a romance at the end of the third movie, I don't know. It just really, it makes no sense in the context of the overall 3-movie story arc when it comes to the two characters and their development. I have my own feelings about that, but this isn't going to be like a film criticism episode. You guys know this is all about personal development. There is a lot to talk about within these two relationships and the level of toxicity there is between the two of them. And I think the hurt that they perpetrate. Well, especially from the side of Kylo Ren, and here's the thing, all of how Kylo Ren, well, actually both of these characters, everything, all of how they behave and react, and especially in their relationship with each other, in relation to each other, it all comes from trauma that they experienced in their formative years, right? Or even traumatic events as they were growing up, or even in the more recent future. I mean, obviously Rey saw the death of Han Solo, who she was already starting to develop a almost kind of paternal relationship with, and then Kylo Ren in that same scene was the one that killed his own father, Han Solo. So lots of trauma kind of informed these characters, lots of trauma and baggage that they're holding on to, and as a result, they have a lot of conditioned responses that they're bringing to the relationship. I mean, obviously, you can see with Rey, I think Rey's a little bit more subtle because, she's not as one-sided of a character as Kylo Ren is, but there's still definitely issues there from the traumas, attachment issues, and being maybe guarded and self-protective from, and this is from the loss, right? She's continually over her life has seen loss. She was abandoned, or at least the narrative that she has about her childhood is that she was left and abandoned. So she's carrying these issues, and then of course with Han Solo, I guess more recently. Anybody that she gets forms a relationship with, she loses. So a lot of issues there, and of course Kylo Ren, right? Like Kylo Ren has a lot of deep rooted issues that he's carrying, pressures of being the pressures of everybody else's expectations on him, right? Like he comes from this pedigree of powerful Jedi, and a general's son, a very prominent public figure at that. He has identity issues that stem as a result of all of that. He has betrayal issues from having been betrayed, or so he thought, by Luke. He has of course being manipulated, right? He has manipulation manipulation. Sorry, I can't talk. Manipulation issues. Manipulation issues? That sounds so weird, but I think it's proper English. Okay, but you guys know what I mean. He has issues from being manipulated by Snoke and everybody else subsequent because of, potentially his prominence, because of his pedigree and being a powerful Jedi. He's being used by the Empire and by Snoke and ultimately by Palpatine. And of course, all of the trust issues that come along with that. So they both bring all of these traumas and the conditioned responses that result from these traumas into their interactions with each other, into the quote unquote relationship. And I'm not saying relationship in terms of like the connection and the romantic aspect of it, right? I'm just talking about like a relationship as in, interactions between two people. Well, even outside of just with each other, you can really trace how these traumas in their past inform their relationships and interactions with the other characters. I mean, obviously, you see the tantrums that Kylo Ren throws pretty much. He has at least one tantrum in each movie, and so like the volatility of his temper. Again, it comes from all the trauma that he's experienced over the years. So my thing is like, yeah, it's a very, very toxic relationship, not just a one way, but to both of them. Yeah. And it just really kind of brings me back to a saying, which, it sounds cliche to bring this up, but it's absolutely true. The saying is hurt people, right? Or hurting people, hurt people. Like if you have past hurts, you generally, what ends up happening is or past traumas, what ends up happening is you create a protective mechanism that becomes a conditioned response, so that in case anything like that ever happens again, you're protected from it, right? And so, both of these characters, you see how their behaviors are a lot of their behaviors, especially with each other, are conditioned responses from past traumas, right? So hurting people hurt people, and it's really, really important to address this because otherwise, yeah, it's just completely unhealthy. And again, like the fact that okay, so back to the REYLO situation, the fact that this became a teenage romance is really annoying to me because it would make no sense. It would make no sense whatsoever unless they both have like what's that thing where like the abused becomes attached, or the person that gets kidnapped and held hostage becomes attached to the person that kidnapped them and held them hostage. I can't remember what Munchausen, is it Munchausen? Anyways, whatever the thing is, like unless it's one of those situations, it makes no sense that Rey or Kylo would would have any kind of romantic feelings towards each other, right? And especially, yeah, for both of them to kind of sacrifice themselves for each other, for this kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's the way it was portrayed in the movie, but it did feel like they really just kind of wanted to pull as much kind of teenage romance out of it as they can, and they tried to work it, but it really for me it didn't work at all, and it made no sense because of how toxic the relationship it really is. There's no reason, in my opinion, that Rey would fall in love with Kylo Ren and vice versa, right? I mean, like, okay, so if you guys have seen that movie, the Last Duel. And that does star Adam Driver. It's very much Kylo Ren. The level of delusion that Adam Driver's character plays in The Last Duel is the level of delusion that Kylo Ren, I feel, has in Star Wars. So yeah, no sense, zero sense. Okay, sorry, let me get off my platform. My point is relationships. We bring into relationships the traumas, potentially, the traumas that we've experienced in our lives, and we carry the traumas with us, right? Like if they're not addressed, we carry the traumas with us, and then therefore we bring those conditioned responses that result from the traumas into the relationships. And so it's really something that's incredibly important to address if we want to have healthy relationships. If we want to have relationships that aren't as toxic and dysfunctional as Rey and Kylo's, we got to really look at these things, right? We got to address these traumas. And so I came up with kind of a checkoff list, a list of things that you can do, that steps, 5 steps that you can follow to help you kind of take a look at some things that might be not working in your relationships, and how you can address them as yourself, right? And that's the other thing too, right? I tend to work from self first, and really I as much as possible don't lay blame or responsibility on anybody else, right? Like one of the biggest things that when it comes to personal development for me is taking responsibility, right? Like it's self-development, not other people development. So it's really important, if there's something that's not working currently in any relationship that you have, that you take responsibility and you address those things in yourself, as potentially the causes of those things not working out. So I came up with 5 steps to help you do just that. Number 1 is awareness. Step number 1, and this is kind of a two-prong step. Part A would be, just being aware that there potentially could have been a trauma that has created this conditioned response in you, right? Like there's different schools of thoughts in terms of the importance of digging in and really finding out what exactly those traumas are. If it's major trauma, it's something that you probably do want to address and look into and have an expert kind of help you retrace and find out what those traumas are. But for things that aren't so major, for a little kind of lesser traumas, it's not, in my opinion, and just for the purposes of this show, it's not necessarily as important, especially when it comes to, I'm not saying it's not important, it is important, but it's not necessary to get into the specifics of the trauma to be able to change the conditioned response, right? And so part B of the awareness is just being aware in the moment, right? Really being mindful, so that you're always present in case a conditioned response happens and something, a communication or an interaction in the relationship goes wrong, right? Because if you're not aware, if you're not mindful, then you won't know that it's happening. If you don't know that it's happening, again, like we talked about that in the episode where we were discussing droids in Star Wars, right? The awareness is really the root and the foundation that we build on with personal growth, because you can't change what you're unaware of, right? So having that awareness, having that awareness that there potentially was a trauma that created the conditioned response, and then being aware in the moment, being really mindful and being really present as much as possible at every moment that you're experiencing, so that you can see and be the outside observer of those conditioned responses, as opposed to just completely being a victim to those, right? So awareness is number 1. It's the foundation of everything. Like you gotta really work on developing your awareness of yourself, awareness of the moment, and being present at all times. Number 2, the next step is give yourself grace. Right? Give yourself grace. Now, like a lot of times what can happen is when we do become aware of transgressions or, these conditioned responses, a lot of times these conditioned responses are ugly, right? Again, don't worry about it. It's a protective mechanism and as a result of a past trauma. So you got to really forgive yourself. You got to give yourself grace and understand that it's not you, it's a conditioned response. It's a protective response, right? Don't beat yourself up. You're not a bad person. Don't lay judgment. Don't lay any kind of those negative adjectives on yourself, because that's just not true. Again, it's a conditioned response that's separate from who you are at your core, right? So give yourself grace if anything like this happens, if there's an interaction that resulted, a negative interaction that resulted from a conditioned response that came from a past trauma. Number three is apologize and take responsibility. I talked about that a little earlier. You got to take responsibility, right? It's like I think for change to happen, you got to own it. right? You got to own responsibility for your side of the deal. So, and you can't, well, also too, taking responsibility is understanding that you can't change anybody else. You can't make anybody else change if they're not ready to change. And you can't rest your well-being on that expectation for anybody to change. The responsibility has to be to and for yourself. And so taking responsibility for your actions and for the patterns and the conditioned responses that happen is tremendously important. And it will go a long way for the other individual to really opening up and to dropping their defenses towards your conditioned responses with their own conditioned responses, right? So own up, take responsibility, apologize for any kind of transgressions. Number 4, which is the last one. I said we were going to have 5, so I guess since the first one was 2-parter, it counts as 2. So this is number 4/5. Reframe the past event. Right, reframe the trauma, whatever it happens to be, and this goes back to number 1, growing awareness around it. Just reframe it, and realize that you don't have to behave in this way because that conditioned response may have served you in the past when you were experiencing the trauma or when you were experiencing the hurt, but it doesn't serve you now in the situation that you're in, especially if it's being destructive to the relationship. So reframe it in a way that really is just letting go of that past, and this kind of touches on the episodes that we had on the Obi-Wan, right? Because everybody in that show, the characters that we had in that show, had all just they were behaving and acting in a way coming out of the major trauma of Order 66. And so that show to me was all about letting go of that trauma and reframing it so that they're not carrying it on their backs and so that they don't have those conditioned responses. I mean, if you look at Reva, she went from being, really, really angry and wanting revenge to just starting her life all over again. So you can do that. You can reframe those things and unprogram. I mean, that's the whole point, right? That's the whole purpose to doing this is to unprogram those conditioned responses, right? Letting go of those past things. And I've never done therapy, but I've heard so many people talk about it and how much it's helped them. If you need, professional help to help you address these things, by all means, please. I really, even though I don't do it, I haven't done therapy myself, I want to really kind of remove that stigma from therapy, at least, especially for my generation. There was, I think, always a stigma about people in therapy and therapists in general, right? Like there was a stigma that, okay, the person in therapy is off their rocker. Right? I mean, that's not true. I mean, again, we all have I think things that we're dealing with in the past, from the past, that would really could be helped by a professional. So if that's something that you need, I encourage you to really seek one. This online therapy that I've been hearing about a lot in the last 6 to 12 months, BetterHelp. They're not a sponsor of the show, which maybe they should be, but BetterHelp, go check them out. Everybody's raving about it. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to sit on a couch. So if that's something you need to help you kind of unprogram these past conditioned responses from old traumas, that's making your relationships potentially toxic and dysfunctional, by all means, I encourage you to go check that out and get some professional help. And so to go over the 5 steps again, number 1, awareness of the trauma. Number 2, awareness of the moment, right? Being mindful and being present. Number 3, giving yourself grace and self-forgiveness. Number 4, taking responsibility and apologizing. And then number 5, reframing the past event and working through the trauma to unprogram the conditioned response. Now, here's the last thing that I want to let you guys know. You don't have to have gone through a major trauma or traumatic event in the past to have conditioned responses. In fact, we all have conditioned responses, whether they came from negative experiences in the past or positive experiences. Our experiences are what inform the programming for us to move forward, that give us those conditioned responses moving forward and how we interact and deal with life. And that's totally okay. That's how the brain was designed to operate. operate, right? It has those things that it picks up so that we don't have to think about things consciously all the time. There's so many functions and functionalities throughout the day, every day, that our unconscious mind can't handle it, right? I mean, even if you add on to that the biology and our physiologies, all the functions in our bodies, the unconscious mind is in charge of that. And so our behavior, we do have part of our behavior that rests a lot on conditioned responses. And so if there's anything that's potentially problematic in a relationship that you have, any relationship that you have, it can usually be traced to a hurt that you felt in the past, no matter how big or small. And so addressing these things is really, really important. And you can follow the same steps. The main thing is just being aware that you do have this conditioned response, and that's what's creating the root of creating the friction in the interactions that you're having with people, and then addressing those things, right? Addressing those things so that you can deprogram, whatever word you want to use, but unprogram that conditioned response and replace it with a more healthy and productive, new response, right? All right, and so it's important to do this no matter at what level. Again, whether you had major trauma or small little hurts, hurting people hurt people, and in a world where that really, I think, can feel like, especially if you're spend a lot of time on the internet, it can feel like it's kind of imploding on itself and people are just eating each other alive. I think we can really, really do well to work on these things so that we can be better, not just for ourselves, but so that we can be better for each other. All right, well, that is going to do it for today's episode. What do you guys think? REYLO, is it an actual thing? Should it have been a thing? No, that's not the real question. The real question is, like conditioned responses. If you look at your interactions and how you deal with people and the different relationships that you have, are there some things that you can potentially work on? Well, are there things that are potentially causing friction in those relationships, and can you work on those things? To me, my answer would be resolute yes. yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to continually. I mean, that's part of personal development, right? That's part of personal growth. There's always room for growth, unless you're like Mother Teresa or something, right? And even then, I'm sure she had her own little idiosyncrasies, right? But like, unless you're at that level, we all have things that we can work on. And again, if we work on these things, we not only make our experience and life experience more enjoyable, but we can potentially make those around us their experience more enjoyable, and we can be better for them. So yeah, I think it's an important thing to look at, and it's part of the work that we do here at Path of the Jedi. That's really one of the reasons why we do the show in the first place. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. You guys know how to reach us. It's POTJ Podcast on Twitter and Facebook. If you like, just whatever it happens to be on your mind, whatever this particular episode happens to trigger, let me know. And of course, you can email us at info@pathofthejedi.com. Leave leave the title of this episode in the subject heading, and give us your reflections. And if you want to send an MP3, even better, I'll play that on the show here. Again, the email is info@pathofthejedi.com. Now it's time for the shout out. All right, this week's shout out goes to all our supporters and followers on our Facebook page, the Path of the Jedi Facebook page, but to one in particular, a gentleman by the name of Dustin Goodall. That's right, Dustin Goodall of Jacksonville, Florida. I just wanted to give Dustin a shout out. I don't really know him personally, but he's been a supporter of the show for quite a long time now, and I always see him interacting with our posts. He's always liking our stuff, and I know he follows the show, and I really appreciate just him being there, right? Like, knowing that Dustin has been following the show for as long as he has, it's really, I mean, for me, like, it's validation. It's validation that I'm doing something right, right? Like, I know I sound really insecure right now, but I mean, like I actually have an audience, and one of those individuals has been with us and following the show for quite some time, and is very, very supportive of that. So I really appreciate Dustin Dustin, and of course everybody that's following us on our Facebook. But Dustin, yeah, man, if you're out there, if you hear this episode, again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for continuing to follow and listen to the show and support what we do here at Path of the Jedi. Of course, if there's anything that we can do for you as a listener, just let us know. Don't hesitate to reach out. I just want to take this moment to shine the light on you for being such a great supporter of us. And so this week's shout out goes to you. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you again for tuning in and supporting the show, guys. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me a week off last week to rest and recuperate. We'll catch you next week with a fresh new episode. We're going to tackle Andor Episode 1, so do not miss it. Until then, be well, be safe, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited, and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.